It has been such a joy and an honor to be with you this week. And I can't believe we're already in the morning of day 4, man. It just feels like it's happened so fast. And it's been cool to see God work. And I love these moments of rest that we had together and the moments of powerful worship and the messages you've heard. And y'all heard my favorite preacher last night. My girl can preach, amen. And so she brought the truth, and it's been so rich. Yeah, to see God work in these ways and to be a part of this is just really incredible for all of us. We're so thankful. And it is, we're like past that halfway point, and so we got to stay at work. And if you have your Bibles, open them up to Psalm 23, verse 5 is our verse for today. You just heard it read, and I'll tell it to you again in case you need that repetition. We get to the middle of this psalm, and the psalmist David says, "You prepared a table for me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows." This is a meal. It is meal time in the psalm, and it's a meal in a different time and place than ours. And I actually heard this backstage. I'm wondering, anytime I think about meals, I think about different cultures. Now, I heard y'all ask the question, how many of you want to live in a different country? But I didn't see how many hands went up. So I'm going to re-ask that question. I'm curious. How many of y'all out there said you think it would be cool to live in a different country? Quite a bit. Okay, how many of y'all want to travel the world even if you don't want to live somewhere else? Almost everybody in the room. Wow, that's amazing. And I don't know what your cultural experiences have been, but if you've traveled the world, you know that different cultures have different customs. Yeah? And you need to know these things so you don't make a fool of yourself. And I know this firsthand by experience, y'all. When I was in college, I got to go on this trip to Thailand, and we spent about a month in Thailand. And early in the trip, we're sitting around this room, and I'm just kind of sitting like normal, like I'm sitting on the couch, and I got my foot up on my leg or whatever, and somebody's like, "Put your foot down." So I put my foot down real quick, and then I was like, I don't know what's going on. So I sat down on the floor, and they're like, "No, put your feet back." I'm like, I am so confused. And so I went back in the other room, and they came in there, and they're like, "You got to stop pointing your feet at people." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And they're like, "You got to stop pointing your feet at other people in the room." I'm like, "Okay, why?" They're like, "That's just really, really rude. It's like flipping somebody off." And I'm like, wow, okay, I don't know what to do with my feet, so I'm just going to stand the whole time. And it's tricky, and especially when you're eating. Man, it can get tricky when you're eating. Eating cross-culturally is always risky. On that same trip to Thailand, we spent a number of weeks with this group of young guys who were like us, so like they were preparing for ministry. And so I was in a place in northern Thailand, and they pulled from the villages in the surrounding countries, and it was like this ministry training school. And we didn't speak the same language as these guys, but we would hang out with them. We'd eat with them. We'd play games with them, play soccer with them, and it was embarrassing. And we played this game, Takraw, which is like, I don't know if you guys have ever seen this game. It's like a cross between soccer, volleyball, and badminton, all right? So you've got this net that's about, I don't know, it's about like nose high, and there's this little wicker ball the size of a small basketball, and you're playing volleyball, but you can't use your hands. So you can use like your head or your shoulders or your knees or your feet, and we were terrible. Like me and my friends were just not coordinated, and these guys are like tiny, right? There's these little just like ninja warriors. It's crazy. And they're like doing triple backflip, roundhouse spikes. I don't even know how to describe it. Anyway, we're playing this game a lot. And one day we knew we were going to play this game with them. And so we wanted to be able to compliment them and to tell them that they're good at this. And so when we're eating breakfast that morning with the missionaries, we said, "Hey, what's the Thai word for good?" And they said the word is aroy. I'm like, "Okay, aroy. Okay, remember that. We got that." So later on, we're playing Takraw with them, and they're destroying us like normal. And then we're like, "Hey, you aroy. We know aroy." And they just kind of stared at us and kind of took a step back. And we're like, well, apparently that didn't work. So later on that evening, we're telling the missionaries the story, and they just start dying laughing. And we're like, "What's so funny?" And they said, "Well, you asked us that question at breakfast, and so we told you the word for good, but like good in the sense of good food, like it's the word for delicious." Okay, so here we are saying, "Y'all are delicious, like we don't taste so good, but y'all are just scrumptious. It's just, this is wonderful." And then they said, to make matters worse, a lot of these young guys come from villages that literally have ancient traditions about large white people coming and eating them. I'm not making this up. Yeah, so like you just got to be careful when you're eating cross-culturally. And so after our time in Thailand, we actually then went over to India for a while, and I'm like, "Y'all got to tell me what to do because I do not want to repeat my mistakes of the past." And we did. We visited a lot of houses, and they were like, "Okay, here's the thing. You're going to be welcomed in, and you're going to greet each other, and then they're going to have you sit down, and they're going to give you tea, this little cup of chai tea. It's delicious, and even if you don't like it and you don't think it's delicious, you drink it, and then they're going to feed you, and they're going to watch you eat, and they're not going to eat because you're their honored guest, and I don't care what they put in front of you, you got to eat it. I don't care how much it is. I don't care how spicy it is. You got to eat it, and you got to smile." And so, man, I can tell you some of these meals, like I've never sweat like that in my life, This food is hot, and I'm just eating and smiling. Anyway, when you eat meals, like you have to know the customs. And we have our eating customs too. You don't really notice them until you break them, right? You don't notice the rules until somebody's not following the rules. Like if you walked in the bathroom later on today and you just see me in the bathroom and I'm sitting down on the floor and I'm barefoot and I'm eating a cheeseburger, this is going to be weird. It's like, why are you sitting on the floor in the bathroom and where are your shoes? Why are you eating a cheeseburger? Like this is not what we do. Or like if Beth and I had you over to our house for dinner. And we open the door and we're like, hey, it's really good to see you. So we're doing a buffet style dinner tonight. So the food is laid out on our master bed. So here in a bit, you can just go into the bedroom, make your plate, then we're going to eat on the stairs. But before we do that, we're going to have a dance party in the laundry room. So head on back there. And if you get thirsty, it's all good. There's a dog bowl right there. You can just kneel down and lap some of that water. Like, yeah, that's not how it works. Like, no, you'd come over and we'd shake your hand, and if it's cold, we'd take your coat, hang it up, and come on in. You want a glass of water, have a seat on the couch, make yourself at home, and then we would eat, right? Like, that's how we do it here. And different cultures do meals differently. And so when you're talking about a meal in the biblical times, when you're talking about this meal in Psalm 23, you got to know, not our culture. And they had their own customs. And even apart from the specifics, maybe the most important thing to know is that meals and hosting and hospitality were a huge deal in the ancient world. I mean, huge. Like, this was the most important social custom they had. If you wanted a good reputation in the community, you make sure you're a good host. Like, this is what they would gossip about. It wasn't who's with who and where's the drama. It was, oh my gosh, did you hear about the meal? I'm not even kidding. If you provided a good meal for someone, they'd tell the story for years, and your status would go up and up and up, and vice versa if you don't. A big deal. So with that in mind, come back to Psalm 23:5. David's praying, and he says in this psalm, he says, you prepare a table for me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. And what I love about this verse is it kind of pulls together all of the first 4 verses. It pulls together the different parts that we've seen into one little scene here. So it's still scary. That's the first thing maybe, is we're still in a scary place. We've not moved away from the valley of the shadow of death. He says, you prepare me a table. Where? In the presence of my enemies. This is literally in the middle of a battlefield. And so we're still in that same hostile place, long way from the green pastures and the quiet waters. But in this scary place, the Lord is still providing. So just like he provided the sheep with the grass and the water, he's provided, you prepare a table for me. And you don't necessarily have to think of a literal like four legs piece of wood. It could be that, but it also could just mean you prepare a spread. So maybe it's like you lay out this cleaned, this animal skin picnic style, and you have all of this food and all of this drink, and you anoint my head with oil. That was their version of the handshake or the hug when you walk into the door. It was a way of saying, you're my honored guest, and I'm glad you're here, and I'm going to be attentive to your needs. And then the meal itself is abundant. There's so much wine. It's overflowing. And it's like, whoa, that's enough. Like, I don't need any more. And so still in this scary place, the Lord is providing this meal for his people. And I think what's going on is David, who's writing the Psalms, I think he's thinking back. I think he's remembering. And I don't know how much you know about the life of David, but he was the king of Israel. He was like the greatest king Israel ever had. But before he was a king, he was a shepherd. Like growing up your age, that was his job. He was the shepherd of his family's animals, of his family's sheep. And when he was a teenager, he was anointed to be the next king of Israel. And then he kind of grew up to be this great warrior. He fought a giant named Goliath. Maybe you've heard of him. And he was victorious. And then he became this general in the army. And his fame was growing. But as his fame grew, the jealousy of the present king also grew. And he didn't like David. And so he tried to kill David. And so David literally was on the run. He's been anointed king, but he's on the run for over a decade of his life. And he's always being chased. And he's always in hiding. He's got this group of warriors with him. And they're just sort of staying alive and figuring things out. And then eventually he's made king. And so now he's on the throne, but he's got responsibilities, and he's got to fight these battles against all these various groups of people who want to take over their territory. Now, some people think David wrote Psalm 23 when he was a shepherd out in the fields with the sheep. I don't think so. No, I think he's in his king phase of life. And I think this because of the presence of the enemies. And if you look at the Psalms around us, and maybe later on, maybe next week, you can read through the Psalms around Psalm 23, and it's a lot of this kind of thing. Psalm 22 is he's saying, my God, why have you forsaken me in this place where all these people are coming after me? Psalm 24, 25, there's these lines about people who are opposing him. Psalm 27, he talks about how he's surrounded by 10,000 on every side, yet still he won't fear. So I think David is in this phase of his life where he's the king, and there's a lot of forces who are aggravated against him, and he's reflecting back on his time as a shepherd. And he's realizing that just as he cared for his sheep, even here the Lord is caring for him. And not just caring for him, but preparing him to go back into the fight. Nobody wants to go to war hungry. And so the Lord is providing what he needs, and he is nourishing him, but he's feeding him not just to nourish him so that he's full, he's feeding him so that he's refueled to go back to war. That's what's going on here. It's not just about being fed, it's about this purpose that God has for David and the way that God equips him to fulfill this purpose. Again, the Lord feeds David not just so David's full, but so that David is ready to take his place in the fight, ready to get to work. And that's what makes this verse so perfect for this moment in our week together. Like I said, we've crested that mountaintop, and we're about to kind of move toward the end. We've got more of this week behind us than we have ahead of us, but we still got some important work to do. And so this is the time to kind of look back on what's been happening so far. And so far, we've been focusing on all that God has done for you, all that Jesus has done for you that you can't do for yourself. And there's this posture of pausing and resting and receiving what God has done. And that's always the first rhythm of life with Jesus, to receive what God has done for you that you can't do, the work of Christ for you. And now we turn our attention to what Jesus is doing in you and with you and through you. Like, that's the way the Christian life works, is you sit and you receive the benefits of Jesus' salvation, and then you walk with him, and then you stand and take up your place in the fight. And that's where we go from here. That's what we'll be talking about for the rest of our week, is what about you and this question of kingdom work? Will you take up your place in the fight? Will you lean into the call that God has placed on your life to be a kingdom worker? And we're going to call you to be a kingdom worker. We're going to call you to commit not just this moment, not just this hour, not just this day or this week, but the rest of your life to what we call kingdom work. And with this in mind, there's one more detail. There's always one more detail. You know, there's one more detail in this line, in this picture, that I think you need to see. And there's two things in it that we need to observe that are going to help us understand kingdom work. You see, this meal in Psalm 23:5 is strange, even in its own context. There's something about it that doesn't quite fit that culture, because normally the master of the household does not prepare the meal himself. No, the master of the household provides the meal, and it's his honor to provide the meal, and he's the one funding everything, but he's calling on servants and helpers to actually make the food and to set the table and to put the food on the table and to pour the drinks, but not this time. Did you catch that? Psalm 23:5 says, "You prepare a table for me in the presence of my enemies." This master is different. This master says, I'm not using my servants today. I'm doing this myself. And if you look closely at this, you can see two things you need to see. And one of the things that you can see in this is the actual shape of kingdom work, what it is, the nature of kingdom work. And you'll see this if you allow this picture of this meal to point you forward to Jesus. And maybe you're already there. Maybe the connections are already happening in your mind. Maybe you know that there's this meal that Jesus has with his followers, and it's the very last meal. It's a very important meal. We read about it in John 13, which is just a couple chapters after Jesus told us he's the good shepherd, the Lord of Psalm 23. A couple of chapters later, we come to 13, and we're about to enter into the last phase of Jesus' life, and he's going to have this last really important meal with his disciples, and they walk into the room for this meal, and what happens at his time and place, their custom was, because they're always walking around in the dirt with sandals on, what happens is you go into the home, and typically a servant or a slave, first thing they do is they go around and they wash everybody's feet so that they can come on inside and eat. But they get inside this home, and I don't know where the servant is, but nobody's done it. And they're just sort of looking around at each other. And Jesus, too, notices, he sees that the feet haven't been cleaned. But what he doesn't do is snap his fingers and says, hey, I need somebody to come over here and take care of this. No. He walks over to the corner and he grabs this bucket of water and this towel. And then he literally, one at a time, kneels down. He kneels down in front of all 12 of his apostles, one at a time, including the one who would deny him, including the one who would betray him, and he washes their feet. And then he gets up and says, if I, your master, have washed your feet, what do you think I want you to do for one another? What do you think I want you to do for others? This is a kingdom led by a king who came not to be served, but to serve. This is the nature of the kingdom, and this is the shape of kingdom work. It's about serving anyone you can, in any way you can, anywhere you find yourself. It's not complicated. It's about seeing the need and meeting the need, opening your eyes to the needs in your family, in your school, on your street, in your community, and doing whatever you can with your abilities, your gifts, your talents, your resources, your body, your mind to do something to take care of people in the name of Jesus. That's kingdom work. But there's a second thing you see here as well. It's not just the shape of kingdom work, it's the identity of the kingdom workers. Now come back to the meal in Psalm 23. Man, if you're going to do this, if this host is going to do this, if this master of the household is going to provide a meal like this where he prepares it himself and he's overflowing the wine, he wants other people to know. Like he wants this story to be told. He wants word to get out, not just for his own glory, but he wants the story to be told that, man, there's this guy in town, and he has a table, and his table is so rich and so abundant, and he cares for everybody so well, and there's more wine than anybody could need because everybody's welcome at this table. He wants people ready to be invited to the feast. And once again, we see that this points us forward to Jesus. One of the things for which Jesus was most well known was his strange eating habits. And I'm not talking about the way he chewed. I'm not talking about where he ate his cheeseburgers. I'm talking about who he had at the table around him. Maybe you know this, that Jesus was famous for eating with the wrong people. This was one of the things that got him killed. Because he's the spiritual leader, this Messiah who's claiming to be the representative leader of God's people, God in the flesh. And you would expect that this spiritual leader is going to hang out with all the religious people. And the people who he's going to invite to his table are the perfect people, are the good people, are the upright people, the people who have wealth as a sign of God's blessing, the people who know what clothes to wear and what actions to take, and they know how to act proper all the time. But that's not who Jesus eats with. No, they're welcome too, but it's not restricted to them. This table is open to everyone. This table is open to the people who doubt, and the people who wonder, and the people who are confused, to the people who question, and the people who fail, and the people who have sinned. This table is open to the people who everybody else looks at as enemies and betrayers and gossips and cheats. And Jesus says, I want you all to come and eat with me. See, what we see here is that the objections that you will feel to kingdom work are being answered in this meal, because you're going to think to yourself at some point today, I don't even know what I'm being called to do. Yes, you do. You're being called to see the need and meet the need, just like Jesus. And you're going to think, no, this is not for me. No, I'm not a kingdom worker. That's for somebody else. That's for the good people. That's for the people that have it all together. And this meal says, no, it's not. It's for everybody. It's for people like me and people like you. The Lord has invited you to his table, and he has cared for you, but not just cared for you, he's prepared you to take up your place in the fight. The Lord is feeding you. He is nourishing you, not just so that you're full, but so that you're refueled to get to work.